I didn't mean to do it. I mean, they sold me out. And as soon as he asked were there any poets in the house, I was the one that got finger pointed, pushed and shoved to the center of a carpet stage, a tiny bookstore in Montgomery, Alabama. It was called Roots and Wings. And I was probably standing somewhere between Nikki Giovanni's love poems and I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and I think I recall Nathan McCall, because it definitely made me want to holler when I looked out at the 50-some-odd of my classmates' faces, staring back at me while I nervously tried my photographic memory, trying to recall the words on a page I'd written over and over again, but never imagined I'd say out loud in front of anyone. I was only 17, but somewhere inside I found the courage, and it carried me line for line until the end. And even after all the hugs and smiles from friends, I was still shaking. And that's when I knew this was real. That's when I knew that words have wings. They're kind of like birds, but mostly like children who you groom and raise. You hope you shape them well, that a sky that has no limits will receive them, that someday somebody will take them home, call them their own, that they will find a place to belong. See, I came from a line where righteousness ran through the blood like Sugar and Rolling Stone daddies. And maybe the people who were pushing me had been here long before my classmates, maybe my grandmother and my grandfather and their preacher sisters and brothers were pushing me too. See, they fed me parables and I acquired a taste for truth. They stood behind pulpits and I stand behind this mic, but just like them, I gotta get on my knees and hum prayers when words don't suffice. I gotta learn to sing the hymns that cannot be found in hymn books. Learn to lean on everlasting arms and hold fast to the words that only God can write on hearts, because these hands, they never knew picking cotton, but the hands that did knew how to spin stories, knew how to sew quilts of memories so I could see my family history in a stitch. And every time my grandmother speaks, I realize that words have roots. They're kind of like trees, but mostly like seeds who you groom and raise. You hope you plant them well, that fertile ground to receive them, that someday somebody will take them home, call them their own, that they will find a place to belong. And words keep encouraging me to dream, keep reminding me that God listens when I sing. And that's how I know this is real, and I am still shaking. Thank you. Hey. Hey, Wheaton. I'm very happy to be here with you all. You look like you have much more of an attentive chapel situation, because when I was in school, we used to have what was called convocation, which is actually a lot more boring than this right here. And every time I'm like speaking in a room full of students, I'm always thinking about the many chapel and convocation services that I, A, went to sleep on, or B, was writing notes or whatever else I was doing to say some other things to my friends when it was over. So, of course, when you're doing that, you're never thinking one day you're gonna be the person, like talking in front of people. So, if you do go to sleep, that's cool, because it would be real hypocritical of me to be like, you get up, you open up your eyes right now. I just can't say anything. I have to be like, well, I hope you have good dreams, so. That's fine. That poem is a true story. I started performing poetry at 17 years old. I'm now 19. No. You almost fell for it though, didn't you? Quite a ways past 19. I just turned 30. So, oh, okay, I got a few woo. Some people are like, oh my God, that's so old. You lived to 30 years old. Woo! Yeah, so that was like many years ago. But I have just fell in love with words and just loved writing. I started writing at 12. And that piece I just told you was my first time ever performing a poem in public. And so, of course, I never thought that I would end up being a writer or performing poetry for a living. I didn't know people actually made a living doing that. Sometimes I still don't know. But But all that to say, you know, if you have a dream in your heart, that you shouldn't forsake it, even if it seems like really unrealistic. When I was a freshman in college, I was actually gonna major in psychology. Any psych majors? I got a couple of psych majors, okay. I was gonna major in psychology because I was gonna be a preacher. I had this in my head since I was like 13. I knew that God was calling me to do something that was gonna involve talking to crowds. For some reason, I knew that when I was like 13. So I thought, that's cool. I'll be a preacher, I'll major in psychology. That's what a lot of women preachers I knew had done. And I'll go to seminary. So my freshman year, my mentor's husband, you know, they called to check on me and everything, because I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, so I moved all the way to Atlanta to go to college. Somebody's from San Antonio in here? Wow, fantastic. I went to Judson High School. Okay, she didn't go to Judson. She was like, no, that's not our school. But that's cool that you're from San Antonio. Nobody's ever from San Antonio. Okay, we'll talk about this later. Like, sorry. I was like, oh, did you have the tacos and everything? Okay, so, anyhow. Yeah, so I had this all mapped out in my head. You know, I was gonna be a preacher, and he and his wife would call and check on me since I was away from my family. And he said to me, he was like, so, you know, he asked you this quintessential question, and I'm sure many of you have been asked, if you were rich and you had all the money, you were set for life, you know. He asked me, would you still go to college? And I said, yeah, I'd go to college so I could write about it. He said, okay. So after you went to college, what would you do with your time? Because you're rich, you don't have to get a job. You could really like be a bum, you know, the rest of your life. And I was like, no, I think I would travel the country. And I'd speak and I'd do book signings and like talk to people. And he said to me, what are you doing in psychology? That sounds like an English major. And I was like, English majors don't make any money. Like, I don't know what they do, like, for a living. At least if you major in psychology, like, you can counsel people, or you could be a doctor if you want, you know? I don't know what English majors do. But I kept thinking about it, and I was like, that's what I'm passionate about, is words. So I was like, I'm gonna take this risk, even though I'm scared to death. And once I switched my major over to English, like, things just started falling in line, and it was very cool to study something that I was really into. So English majors, rock on. Rock on. And you can make a living. You won't like be like broke forever, okay? Just so you know. So I was gonna do this poem about my mom, because my mom was a big influence on why I even started performing poetry. I actually wrote poetry a long time and never had any intention of showing it to the public, really. And my mom was one of those moms, I don't know if any of you have a parent like this, where like in her house, like it's her house. So like there are no secrets. If she finds a notebook, she's gonna open it up and read it. Like there's no like, well, Mom, that's my private stuff. Like you don't really have private stuff in here because you don't have a job and you don't pay any bills. So since I'm doing that and I chance upon whatever it is, like I'm checking it out. So she came upon one of my notebooks and she was like, I think your poetry's really good. You should do more with this. And I was like, oh, Mom, you're just saying that because you're my mom and you think everything I do is like so fantastic. I don't believe what you're saying, you know? So she's like, that's fine. She takes one of my poems and submits it to a competition, right? Yes, yes. This is characteristic behavior of my mom. Because I just refused to perform the poem. So she submitted to a competition, and if it won, I had to go there and perform it. So it won. But she didn't tell me till it got all the way right there. So by that time, there was no backing out. There was no like, oh, I'm not gonna go. And like, I didn't have a job or a car or anything. So she's like, you're gonna get in this car and we're gonna drive out there. But I had to like really be thankful for my mom, because without her encouragement, I wouldn't have had the courage. And now like, it's something that I love to do, and I'm here with you. So I'll do this poem about my mom, and hopefully any of you that are nerds in this room, do I have any nerds in the building? A few nerds, okay. Yeah, like, I wish I had a picture of what I used to look like. I'm kind of like one of those people that if you saw my pictures from like high school and junior high, you'd be like, whoa, like what happened to her? Yeah, I need to be on one of those, you know, one of those makeover, not the makeover show, but the show that like Maury does sometimes, where he's like, I used to be a nerd in high school. Now I'm so fly. Don't you hate that you didn't get my phone number back then? You know, like the long drawn out title, like, I was definitely nerdy, like in the library. Like I was so much more into books than, you know, looking great. Like I didn't care about that. So this poem was like dedicated to my mom because she's such a big reader and she really helped me, you know, become who I am. So if you're a nerd or a bookworm in here, like some of these books you'll remember. If you're a cool person, ask a nerd in your life and they'll explain to you. Like if you've never heard of Shel Silverstein, you're like, I don't know who this guy is. Ask a nerd in your life. They read this, okay? So this poem is called God Bless Mom. My mother read books to the swollen stomach that would become me. Read about what to expect when you're expecting, about disciples, apostles, prophets, sinners, and saints, until her semicolon burst, sending amniotic vowels and consonants to splitting apart. The time between my sentences grew less than 5 minutes apart. My paragraph had arrived, and her margin stretched 10 centimeters wide so quickly that there would be no time for epidural or explanation. She must breathe, push, labor, count to 10, and then count 10 fingers and 10 toes. Trace her hands along the lines of little eyes, little ears, little mouth, little nose. And from the light of touch lamp on nightstand, she read me golden books, sat me down in Peter's chair, kicked me rhymes from the Berenstein Bears. We put our hands together and said our prayers. That God would bless Teddy Ruxpin, Barbie and Ken, that God would bless Sydney, my one-eyed stuffed animal, koala bear best friend, that God would bless Daddy and Grandma, right before Mom showed me where the wild things are. See, she taught me to read until I was reading her to sleep. Words given to me by the number 5 and the letter A on Sesame Street, and oh, the places I would go, with Sam Green Eggs and ham in tow, searching for golden tickets and Roald Dahl's prose. I wanted to float on giant peaches with James. Read Beverly Cleary, Ramona, and Beezus until I was Amena the Brave. I never really went through that stage of slipping my little girl feet into my mom's heels to play dress up. I just wanted to read her library when I grew up, hoping I could be one of Mufaro's beautiful daughters and maybe one day turn the pages of Tar Baby. See, she taught me to find my roots in the handshake of Alex Haley, taught me to love the stale paper scent of the library, to treasure books, cards, and stationery. And even today, years later, she joins me at the kitchen table talking womanhood over the scent of Earl Grey tea, taking in all the mystery, life's and Walter Mosley, trading Baldwin and Baraka, singing songs of Solomon, exchanging journals, wisdom, and pens. And she reminds me with a skillful subtlety that sometimes this is where the sidewalk ends. That many storylines will end, only for better ones to begin, that life is a page turner, and you should write your own plot twists, that many people will call themselves writers, but there's only one author who knows the end from the beginning, and sometimes the best and hardest thing you'll ever do in your life is trust him. Never forget, pay close attention to your character, and remember that people are characters. They come and go, but never discount them. People are characters, and your story won't happen without them. See, there is light in the attic, at the end of tunnels, and in her eyes. So tonight, before I shut off nightstand light, I pray that God will bless Mom, and I'll read myself to sleep. Thank you. Okay, so I just remembered something I was supposed to explain to y'all beforehand, but I didn't, so I gotta explain it to you right now. So I have a sister who's 19. She's fabulous. She's great. And every time I do this poem, she's like, I remember after a few times, she was like, so what is Teddy Ruxpin? Which obviously by your silence, you don't know who Teddy Ruxpin is either. So that's what I need to explain. Okay, so I'm trying to explain to my sister, because obviously there's like a 10-year difference. I was a kid like in the 80s. Okay, so Teddy Ruxpin, I'm so excited, even though my mom never let me get one, but he used to have all these commercials in the 80s. Okay, so Teddy Ruxpin was like a teddy bear like a stuffed animal, but he had a cassette player in his back. Okay, so you get like the cassette and he would like read a story to you and his lips like move like that. And I'm like I'm really getting excited, like trying to explain it to my sister, because she's like, every time you do that point about Mom, you mention Teddy Ruxpin, and like, I don't get it. And I was like, but he would read you the story and you put the tape back there and then he would read it. And it was like somebody was reading the story, but like nobody was there except him. And she was like, whatever, I'll just go on YouTube. Like, you're doing way too much. So that is your historical fact for today. You can, go YouTube Teddy Ruxpin. I'm sure that'll be beneficial to your studies, that you now know that information, and that you realize some of the things we were doing that were fun, that you're like, why would they think that's so fun? But it was, man. I was like begging my mom, please. And she's like, you better read yourself a story. I am not buying you this little teddy bear so you can put cassette tapes in the back. Like, no. Fantastic. So the other thing that I was going to say, and which I think is going to be a good segue into this next poem, I do poetry probably in what I would describe as two different environments, although if we think about our lives, it's all of a piece. Sometimes we segment our lives into like, these are the things I do for God, and I don't know what the rest of this is, like, and then this is regular life or something, I don't know. When really, it's just our life in general, and God wants all of that, and God knows about all of that. But of course, a lot of environments I'm in where I'm performing poetry, they are churches, they are Christian environments, and sometimes I'm in environments that are coffee houses or clubs, or they're just regular people say whatever they want to say in those environments. And I love that. That helps me to be a better writer. It helps me to be more human and more humble. I definitely grew up as a church kid. I became a believer when I was 12 years old. So I really don't have that story of like, oh, I lived this whole life and then I came to Jesus. Like, I really grew up around God. I'm sure some of you had this experience where like, you kind of like grew up around God, like he lived down the street from you and like you knew his family, but like you didn't really kick it with him. You're like, yeah, I think I remember where he lived. I think we had a class together. But, he wasn't like your close friend, kind of like that. And once I got to probably college, that was really my first time of really having my own relationship with God, separate from what other people expected of me, what they expected me to be like, whatever being a Christian looks like, And so now what's a big deal to me is I have a big heart to be in environments with people who didn't grow up like me, who don't have my story, who aren't so familiar with all the scriptures and stories. Like, if you've been in church so long, after a while, you're like, oh, right, the one about Noah, and right, the flood and the bears, and that's cool. That's fine. Oh, and then the Red Sea and all, right, and you put the staff up, that's fine. Like you get real common with it. But really, if we think about it, in the grand scheme of the world, globally, there are a lot of people that those stories are not commonplace to them, that they don't know what in the world you'd be talking about. And that's a part of what God calls us to do, is to be a light, to go into a dark place. And I always want to make sure I'm still going into a place that needs hope, that needs light. And so whatever that is for you, whatever environments those are, like, force yourself to go into some places where there are people who don't believe like you, because they need the hope you have inside. So I'm a big hip hop fan. I don't know if any of you are like real into hip hop out here. Oh, that's like 7 people. That's cool. That's fine. It's okay. Well, some of you really like hip hop. You just weren't gonna say it now, but you can talk to me about it at the table. I'll be out front. So I'm a big hip hop fan. I just grew up on hip hop, and really a lot of how I write comes from hip hop culture. So I was thinking about the whole story of Jesus, like the story of the gospel. I remember the first time I read the first chapter of the book of John. Anybody familiar with this one? You're like, I don't know, I don't read the Bible. So, for those of you that do, first time I read the first chapter of John, I was like, this guy has got to be like a lyricist of some kind. Like he's got to be like an MC or a poet or something, okay? Because if you think about it, think back to this first chapter of John, okay? John opens up. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in darkness, but the darkness cannot recognize it. The true light, who gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was there through him, the world didn't even notice. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Even in his own land and among his own people, he wasn't wanted. But to those who believed him, to those who accepted him, to those who believed he was how he claimed and would do what he said, he gave the right to become children of God. This guy has got to be an MC, right? How could you come up with this? I mean, I didn't even write that. I didn't write it to like have rhythm or, you know. It's exactly how it was in there. So then I have what can be a strange imagination at some point. So then I'm like reading my Bible like, okay, so if John is an MC, maybe like, what would it be like if Jesus and the disciples, they were all hip hop? Okay, because in my head, I always have this like Greek kind of vision of them. Like they have these togas and like these kind of Birkenstock looking sandals or something. And like, you know, I just always have that very like kind of Greek statue thing going. So I'm like, well, skip all that. What if they were wearing like baggy jeans and Timbs and sneaks, and like some of them had locks and bald heads and goatees, and like they were really fresh, right? You know? I mean, I'm just assuming that if they were wearing sneakers, they would have been fresh. I'm just thinking, right? Okay, and I was thinking, how could I tell the story of Jesus to my friends who are into hip hop, that they would understand like hip hop language? Like, how could I tell the story, right? And the one thing I'll say, like, I guess as an example, because sometimes I read the Bible and there are parts of it that I'm like, I just don't get why people would do that. Like, okay, here comes Jesus, which like, I'm sure Jesus was really cool, but like, if you really think about the reality of the situation, these guys are like fishing or whatever it was they were doing for a living, and this strange man walks up like, you should drop those and follow me. And these people drop what they're doing and like give up their whole life and go with him. Like, that is really weird. Like, if one of my friends came to me and was like, I don't know, I was on the basketball court and like, this guy came up and he was like, you should like forget b-ball and come with me. And I went with them. I'm like, are you crazy? Do you, like, what's the deal? But the more I looked into the story, is Jesus, his reputation preceded him. So he really wasn't a stranger, like walking up to these guys. It'd be like, what's this guy's name? I'm not real into sports, but I'm gonna try to go with this example for y'all. What's this guy's name who's over the Lakers, the coach? Phil? Who? Yep, thanks, Phil Jackson. Okay, go with it. So imagine you have heard of Phil Jackson before. You know this guy coaches one of the best teams in the NBA. You are on the basketball court one day, Phil Jackson walks up and says, you should drop this ball and come follow me. You're like, I'm out. I don't know what you guys are doing, but this guy says I should go with him. Well, Jesus had a reputation. People knew that he was a good teacher, that he was a leader. So it wasn't this strange, spooky moment. You know, it was like Russell Simmons or, yes, Diddy is the next name I was gonna say. It's like, if you were performing somewhere and Diddy's like, you should drop that thing you're doing and come with me. You're like, that's it. I'm singing, I'm going with this guy, right? But that's the amazing part about Jesus, that when we think about him in the context of other people that we know now that have all these followers, that really he had that reputation. He had that way that his name and his word meant something. Right? And even if we think about Jesus at that time, had less followers than some people do like on Twitter. But he was able to take those followers, and now like he has followers all over the world. So I was thinking, how can I tell this story? and make it like a little bit hip hop. So here's what I came up with. And this poem is called Waiting to Tell You. Jesus came in the brand of his own name, wearing swaddling clothes, love, mercy, and a manger. 3 wise men discovered him. They had no idea they were leading the world to worship him. He told the angels to hold it down, decided he was going down to a small town called Bethlehem to grow and consume the stomach of a virgin whose womb would birth the man that would save the earth, the one who would give me my worth. He did more in 3 years than most of us do in 30. He fed 5,000 with 2 fish, 5 loaves, told 51 stories to save millions of souls. He mentored 12 disciples to be betrayed by one, denied by one, doubted by one. He was the one to take on all of our mistakes, plus the weight of all of our secret known sin, plus the weight of a 110-pound cross that was after they beat him, slapped him, lashed him. He paid the cost. How could an innocent man withstand death by lethal rejection, injecting into his veins our sinfulness, our selfishness, just so we could breathe in his righteousness? See, I've been watching you smoke blunts and meditate, read the Bible and any other spiritual text you can get your hands on, searching for answers to a bunch of philosophical questions like, what is life and who or what is God? Do we die? And if we die, where do we go? Well, I've been waiting to tell you about this cat named Jesus who has all the answers, trying to think of a way to describe him to you because he was a man. He is God, came to this earth, lived, died, then he lived again. This one man started this revolution called Christianity, which has now been watered down to Bible-toting, t-shirt wearing, and keychains that say, what would Jesus do? I think if Jesus had walked the earth in our time, maybe the source or vibe would have landed his post-resurrection interview, and the cover would say, real life after death. That's more than Tupac or Biggie could do, because all eyes would be on him, and they treat him like Diddy, asking him, so what is the secret to your success? He'd tell him it's just one word, death. Death on a cross. Life after death and love. Yeah, he would have talked about love because he has this way of looking into your eyes and knowing your whole life story without you even saying a word, because that's just the type of cool cat he is. And that's what I've been trying to tell you. He is. He didn't just come to speak, prophesy, and die. He's the only one who looked death in the face, told death, holla back, and moved on without another thought. Truth is, I want you to know him. The sweeter truth is he wants to know you too. Jesus Christ is the true spoken word. Thank you. I probably have to like rewrite that poem at some point so I can add like Lil Wayne and Drake. I'll work on that and report back via YouTube. That way you can check that out. So this next poem, which is one of my favorite pieces, is actually, whenever I write poems about God, I just never want it to be like cliche, because I just have heard enough cliches and I just want to say something fresh to God. And as a poet, when I'm in other environments and I get to hear these amazing poets, you know, they take these very interesting angles on a story. Those of you that are writers will like get into this part. If you're not into it, ask your writer friend at lunch today, okay? So when you're a writer, or even just an artist in here, or people that have artistic leanings, you kind of always want to take this different way on the same story that, you know, people may be familiar with. And so I was thinking about this whole idea of betting and gambling. And I actually was having a conversation with a friend, and I was getting really frustrated with him because he's wondering why his life isn't successful, why he can't like really be this person he wants to be. And I'm looking at him like, dude, you're not able to be successful because you don't give 100% of yourself to anything. You give like 25% over here, and then you might give like 65 to this, and then another 15 over here, and like you can't win that way. At some point, some time arrives in life that you got to give your all to something. So I got mad. And I was like, and I'm going to write a poem and tell you why you need to get yourself together. So I go and I start working on the poem, right? Which is the amazing part about God, because I start working on it. And as I'm working on the poem, God is really dealing with me. Like, what are the things that you bet on in a way? Like, if I always imagine life is this big negotiating table, and you're always making these decisions, and you're sitting there, you're at your side of the table, and whatever that decision is across from you, and you're having to decide, how much does this cost me, right? Can I really afford? Is it worth it to me to give whatever this is gonna be? And sometimes I've had decisions in life that I slid my chips to the middle, and I bet everything on that, and I lost. Because whatever I was investing my time in or putting all of my efforts into really wasn't worth it. And if you think about it, faith is one of the biggest gambles we'll ever take, because you can't touch God with your physical hands, you know? You can't see him like you can see the person next to you. And I have taken the gamble on God. I put all my chips to the middle and I bet on him. And it's not that life is an easy life. Following Jesus does not promise you this easy cakewalk situation. You're gonna have struggles. You're gonna go through tough times, but you can go through anything if God is with you. It's a big gamble to take, but it's the best gamble I've ever taken in my life, to put all my chips in there with God. And I started to think about that, like, if life were this big casino, what is it like for Jesus to come into that? What does it mean for him to save us? And every time I do this poem, it just touches my heart, because I always feel like I'm still in this place. There's still areas of my life that I'm having to come to God and slide my chips to the middle. So hopefully many of you out here, you've already decided God is the one you want to bet on. Maybe you're in here and you haven't. But the beautiful thing about that is that it's your choice. That God gives you that. It's your choice to choose what you're going to bet your all on, you know? But think about what you're putting your time into, what you're giving your 100% to, or if you're giving 100% to anything. And if you're going to find anything in this world to give 100% to, give it to God. Give it to God. And I'm not promising you this, you know, this easy life with that, but you give it to God. God's got the rest of it. God's got your future and what your purpose in life is and who you're going to be with the rest of your life and where you're going to travel to. Like, God knows all that. You know, there's no reason for you to worry about all that stuff. So I'm going to actually close with this poem, and then I'd love to talk to you guys some more. This poem is called Betting It All. Dear God, I pray and close these eyes, knock these dice, I pray to win. Like last penny, itching to scratch $1 million out of one last dollar. Like the difference between 10 seconds, 10 yards, and a touchdown. Like dropping coins into slot machine wishing wells. All the world's a casino. All the men and women are merely gamblers, placing bets, counting chips, calculating risks. And these little bitty arms have tried their hand at boxing with God. Arms never long enough. Mind never smart enough to outfox him, because he knows exactly what to do to get me to honestly praying, where I forget the cliches and all the stuff I say to make up for my lack of faith and trust, when I ain't got nothing else to give except giving up. It's tough to lay your oh so visible life into seemingly invisible hands, but at some point, we all end up in the place where Abraham had to stand, offering only hopes, with little to no hope of regaining what we think we stand to lose. But the amazing thing about God is he never takes away our ability to choose. See, I've stood at many forks on the road, put my life on hold, bartered with God for a compromise, trying to minimize my sacrifice, hoping if I raise him a Sunday morning, maybe he won't see my Friday night. But ain't no betting with God unless you betting it all. That's heart, mind, body, soul. So most times, I fold. And with every lie, the stakes get high until I'm in over my head in a debt I'll never repay, until this humble hustler asks the dealer to deal him in. Says if he wins this hand, all debts are on him, but we don't believe him. He looks too new to the scene, like he never cashed in a chip, never smelled the scent of newly minted green, but he just smiles and holds his cards close to the chest, says focus on hearts and let the rest worry about itself. See, he came to pay debt with death so I could see him face to face. And when it was time to pay up, Jesus stood in my place. And that's how I know there's more to grace than bowing heads and praying over meals. See, it's not how much good we can do. God just wants us to yield. These little bitty arms have tried their hand at boxing with God, and now this heart is going to take a chance at betting it all.